Hey, what's up? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Roll Pod, an Alabama sports podcast from Bama 24/7. I am Cody Goodwin here with both Mike Rodak and Alex Scarborough. We're here to discuss Alabama's season opening win over Western Kentucky, 63-0 victory for the Crimson Tide. Start the 2024 season 1-0. We're going to get to the offense, the defense, what we thought the plays of the games were, who we thought the game MVP was. We got a lot to pick off of this tree branch today. But before we get to all of that, I do have a fun announcement to make. See if I can do this properly as the podcast producer, ran into a celebrity on Saturday near the end of the game and was able to take a selfie with the one and only Big Red.
Oh, nice.
And so I was thinking, my
this
announcement is that I'm going to attempt to take a selfie with every opposing team's mascot that Alabama plays this year, for no other reason than to give me something more to look forward to each game. It might be kind of tricky for some of these games, especially when we go on the road games, or Mike and I were talking before we hit record, which Georgia mascot is going to show up, right? Is it going to be the fluffy, mean-looking Bulldog, or are they actually going to bring, is it UGA 11 now? Which one do I have to get? So that's going to be a fun challenge, but I thought I would share this picture with everybody, especially you, Alex, since I know you were out on assignment on Saturday, so you didn't get to see the dancing red blob in the Western Kentucky side of things. But here we go. This is my new announcement to start off the 2024 season.
It's fantastic. It's everything I hoped it would be and more. If there is no live mascot for Georgia, your task has to be to go find a tailgate with a Bulldog and take a photo with it, because you need to go the extra mile.
I like that. See, that means I need to get there early now. That's what, a 6:30 kick on ABC. It's still, it's at the end of the month, so I got some time to pre-plan, and maybe I can reach out to some Georgia people to see if UGA's going to actually travel or if it's just going to be the actual mascot. I literally walked through the gate. You know how 6 minutes left in the game, we're allowed down on the field so we can catch kind of the end of it down there. And this game was so well in hand that I think everybody was down there with 6 minutes to go. But as soon as you walked through that main gate, he was just standing right there, Big Red. So I literally just tapped him on the shoulder and showed him my phone, and he just immediately got into position. So I was like, all right, I'm going to see if I can do this with every mascot. So it might be tricky, but we're going to see what we can do.
I personally want to see you do Mike the Tiger at LSU. Take a selfie with him and see what happens.
They used to bring him on the field in a cage, and they've since stopped doing that. It was one of the weirder experiences.
There's pictures, and it has to be real. The Detroit Lions in the 70s used to have a live tiger on the sidelines, and there was no cage. It was just on a leash. Not a tiger, sorry, a lion. Detroit Lions had a live lion on their sideline.
I would absolutely do the selfie with a live, dangerous animal as long as they're in a cage. I've held a little baby gator before. One, it's maybe 3 feet long, if that, probably way smaller than that now that I'm saying that out loud. But I also had to grip that thing by the neck to be yo, don't move while somebody takes a picture here real quick, and then they'll put the thing back on your snout so that you don't bite me. So if it's a live animal, I just protect me a little bit and I'll do my best.
It's the teeth that
get you. We are. That's my fun announcement. That has absolutely nothing to do with the actual game, which is what we're here to talk about. Again, Alabama 63-0 winners over Western Kentucky. This was a blowout in every sense of the word. This is kind of Alabama taking care of business, right? This was pretty dominant, 21-0 after the first quarter, 42-0 at half. Jalen Milroe scored 5 touchdowns. We got to see Ryan Williams, Hollywood, burst onto the scene. The defense pitched a shutout. First shutout, I believe, for the defense since 2022 when they beat Austin Peay 34-0. Just an overall, I thought, pretty good performance. And so to start today's show, I got kind of a structure here that I'm hoping to keep with every single reaction pod that we have throughout the season. I was just curious, everybody's initial reaction. Mike, I'll throw it to you first. Initial reaction, instant reaction, just immediate takeaways from Alabama's season opening win.
Yeah, I think that Keon Sabb's 2 interceptions were a turning point in the game, if you will. I think that really demoralized Western Kentucky. If they had any hope or prayer in their minds of competing with Alabama, I think once they saw TJ Finley throw a pass to Keon Sabb, I mean, the pass was intended to Keon Sabb. I think the rest of the team's all right, this is not happening. And then they drove. The second interception was them driving down the field, and it was a pretty extended drive, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was down 3rd and 6 at the Alabama 22 after about 10 plays. And they were kind of moving the ball. You're like, all right, like what's going on here? And then another forced throw over the middle. And right after that is when Alabama scored, make it 14-0. And after that, I mean, the wheels kind of fell off for Western Kentucky. And if there's any hope of them threatening the secondary, that didn't happen. Even Kalen DeBoer seemed a little bit surprised by that he put guys like Mbakwe and Mincy on the field pretty early. Obviously, Xavier Brown started, and he kind of was thinking maybe I have to keep my eyes on those guys to make sure, do I trust them essentially out there? And he said that he didn't. Like his eyes weren't gravitating towards them. So there just wasn't a whole lot of fears realized, I guess, and other than the bad snap, when I think everybody in the stadium is like, here we go again. If I had to do a stock up and stock down from this game, I think I'd put Seth McLaughlin in the stock up category because maybe it wasn't all him. I don't know. And after the game, it sounded like, reading between the lines, like it wasn't totally putting the blame on Parker Brailsford. That DeBoer was saying it was a communication issue where Brailsford was making a call and Milroe clapped his hands for the snap and wasn't, the timing wasn't right. And even Milroe, I think, said first game jitters is what he attributed that to. So maybe there's something to it for Seth, but overall, I mean, I thought it was going to be I don't say a closer game in a sense that it was like actually going to be close, but I was expecting Western Kentucky to actually score at some point, and I wasn't necessarily expecting Alabama's offense to put 63 points on the board. So, but as good as we could have hoped, I guess, for Alabama.
Yeah, I think the Keon Sabbs interceptions, tone setting plays, I suppose, especially after Alabama's offense went 3 and out to start the game, and we're all just like, okay, well, let's see what happens now, right? And then back-to-back picks, I guess, on back-to-back possessions. They led to touchdowns. It was 14-0 in a blink. And yeah, I think I had even said this too multiple different times. Western Kentucky's offense, just what they had been doing, and I know this year's team is not last year's team and the teams that they've had in recent seasons, but I kind of figured they would provide a little bit of a stress test for this new look defense as a whole, but especially the secondary, just with all the turnover there. And Sabb was the star of the show with 2 picks, and one of them he took back 64 yards, almost ended up scoring a touchdown, but the offense ended up taking care of business 2 plays later. But yeah, like there really was no stress in this test, so to speak. Like I know Sabb was the primary beneficiary, but really the secondary as a whole held up really well. I think they only threw for 100-some total yards, if that. I'm pulling up the final game stats now. 103 total yards passing between 2 different quarterbacks. TJ Finley, Caden Veltkamp combined to complete 55%, 22 of 40, 2 interceptions. A lot of that I think was just on them making some poor decisions and their offense maybe being out of sync a little bit, and just also Alabama's defense. There's still a level of pressure that they were able to get on a team, and I don't know. Like that was I was same as you. I was a little surprised that the stress test that we thought this game could be, it just never really manifested that way. Alex, I know you got to watch this game not from the press box, but I mean obviously you were paying attention to it the same way we were. What was your maybe initial reaction or instant takeaway from the result?
Yeah, it felt like scrimmage number 3, maybe a preseason game, which is not to diminish what it was. You have to start, and this is about as strong a start as you could possibly ask for. But was there conflict? Was there tension? Was there any of those things? Not really. I mean, you had to overcome a little bit of adversity when you're talking about the Caden Proctor injury in the warm-ups or the headset communication on-off thing with the offense, and they didn't let it get to him. So you got to give credit where credit's due. Seeing the functionality of the offense, seeing Jalen Miller look very comfortable, the willingness to run the football and do it very effectively was interesting to see, because that was a question I had, because he thinks of himself as a passer. So seeing those things, seeing the defense really, I don't know what percentage of the playbook they played with, but the way everybody flew to the football was noticeable. Even in the second half, it was very like that swarm D thing. It feels like there's something to that. Now, what that will lead to, I don't know, but it's the first look at the operation, right? And the operation was clean, effective, explosive, everything you want, you got done. So I mean, it's A plus. I mean, you can't fault the test. You can only take the test as it is, and they pass it with flying colors.
I agree with that. I guess my instant takeaway was just Alabama was the bigger, faster, stronger team, and they played like it. That said, I was impressed by the 63 points. Like Mike said, I don't think anybody was anticipating that big of a number. I was impressed with the 600 total yards of offense. To your point, Alex, both offense and defensively, I'm not sure that they cracked open any more than 10 or 15% of the playbook, if that. But the fact that they were still able to produce in the way that they were was very impressive. I think it was at halftime they had run 20 plays and scored 42 points, like 2.1 points per play in the first half. That's ridiculous. So, and part of that, I think even like if you really want to nitpick this, it was a little clunky in the first half, to be honest, right? Like the offense went 3 and out to start. There were I think 5
start on Booker. Yeah, the holding on Roberts called back.
Yeah.
He had the bad snap from Burrowsford. You had the high snap on Milroe's first touchdown run there. Kind of got, I'll say overlooked, but when you have a touchdown run, nobody's going to notice it. But yeah, Milroe caught the ball up here, and then I guess that was a foreshadowing of what happened later. There just wasn't a whole lot of because they had those big plays, there wasn't a whole lot of substance to really look at. I mean, Milroe threw 9 passes. The running game, I mean, Jam Miller and Justice Haynes had 9 total carries. So of the big players that you're thinking of at Alabama, your quarterback threw 9 passes and your 2 running backs had a combined 9 runs. The amount of data to look at there is pretty small, but they certainly made the most of the data that they put on paper there.
Yes, 65 total plays by the offense, 67 total plays for the defense. That was the one unfortunate thing, is you didn't get to see a lot of guys get a lot of action because of the limited number of snaps. A lot of guys saw the field, but it just wasn't – it was hard to get a feel for how certain guys were going to perform, just because every time you turned around, Alabama was, running the other way for a touchdown, or they were, forcing Western Kentucky off the field with turnovers or turnover on downs.
Right. And, I mean, the 84-yard touchdown by Ryan Williams, and DeBoer broke down that play. And I think he even said they saw on film, the corners, they knew the corners might play up a little bit. And that corner just misplayed that badly. I mean, he even was pointing back at the safety, but the safety took the post route over the middle, and Ryan was just wide open. And obviously he's good, but I think a lot of receivers are going to catch that pass. It's just, you're playing against a team that just wasn't ready for prime time, which stinks, because I think it's a bad product for the fans and people who pay money to go and watch these games. I mean, I guess it's nice to have the experience and have a few drinks and, sing some songs and all that, but the football itself is not a good product. And I hope college football moves away from Western Kentucky and South Florida and Mercer making up almost half of your home games, when you have as much money as people spend to go into the stadium and how much money they've spent on the stadium. That's not a good product to me.
Yeah. I mean, to be
not
fair,
Alabama's fault necessarily. It's just how college football works. But I hope as a organization, college football moves past that.
Yeah. But I mean, it's on paper, like we talked about from the very top, Western Kentucky, we thought would be a better program than this. So we thought there would be a little bit of test on the defense. It just didn't turn out that way. Maybe they're in for a down year, maybe not. It's hard to gauge those things. But if you're going to schedule a group of 5, I thought this was a pretty good one to do. But you're right. I mean, and we've talked about it before. There's the cynical part of me that wonders what the playoff selection committee is going to truly value, and whether they are going to put strength of schedule first and foremost, because that needs to be the case, because teams can schedule. Will they be able to schedule their way into the top 12? But that's another pod.
No, I think just, again, Alabama was the bigger, faster, stronger team, and they played like it. You look at their scoring drives. After the first interception, 2 plays, 16 yards, touchdown. After the second interception, 3 plays, 26 yards. After that, 4 plays, 81 yards, 2 plays, 80 yards, 2 plays, 96 yards, 2 plays, 55 yards. Western Kentucky, I believe, had 8 total yards of offense in the second half. And I think that was after, they had that 21 play drive where they got all the way down to the 8, and Alabama held on 4th down because they, I think throughout that drive, they were continuing to do their defensive rotation thing where there was freshmen and reserve guys and depth guys who were out on the field, and they were giving up, a handful of third downs, couple of fourth downs as well. On that fourth down play, you could tell Kane threw the starters back in and said, hey, just get us off the field, right? And they did, and it worked. And that was, I guess, encouraging to see. And then 2 plays later, Justice Haynes goes 85 yards the other way. And then whatever spirit remained on the sideline, that big run just wiped it out completely, because that was more or less the true end of the game. Like, whatever it is Western Kentucky wanted to come in and prove or work on, they just, I don't want to say they threw in the towel, but you could tell that the energy from their sideline from that point on was gone. Like, it was just, that was more or less the end of the game. And even as I rewatched it this morning, we're recording this on Sunday afternoon, you could tell it on TV as well. Like, as soon as they got that stop, and then 2 plays later, Justice Haynes goes the distance, it's like, all right, we're moving on to week 2. I have seen enough here.
I've seen better efforts from bad opponents than Bryant-Denny, to be honest. Like, I don't think they showed up. And that's not a knock against Alabama for not, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think Western Kentucky just didn't show up in a way that they could have. I think they are a better team than what they showed.
Alabama's offense, as we mentioned, 600 total yards of offense, 334 yards rushing, 266 yards passing. Jalen Milroe finished with 5 touchdowns, 3 passing, 2 rushing. Ryan Williams was the star in the receiving game, 2 receptions, 139 yards, 2 touchdowns, averaged a clean 69.5 yards per reception. Jam Miller, Justice Haynes both had rushing touchdowns. So did Ty Simpson. So did Dan Mountain, or Daniel Hill, if you're looking at the roster, true freshman who's 6'1", 240, and got some run later in the game. 9 carries, 29 yards, scored a touchdown there near the end of the game. Alex, I'll start with you this time. What is one thing you liked about what you saw from the offense on Saturday?
Shocking explosiveness. I mean, when you can hit the big play like that, it puts you in a really good spot. And yet again, Ryan Williams running wide open, of course. But when it's your first action inside Bryant-Denny Stadium with the lights on, that's how you want to get things going. You want a guy confident when he's only 17 years old playing that position, and you're going to rely on him. So everybody feeling good offensively. But yeah, it's the big play. And we saw it a lot last year, of course, but to see that continue was really good. I mean, yeah, it's, again, reference, you only run 60-something plays and you score 63 points. It says you're doing something right, not just schematically, but in terms of execution.
They had 10 running plays that went 10-plus yards, and I believe 4 of them went 20-plus yards. In the passing side of things, they had 6 plays go 15-plus yards, and then obviously they had the 55-yard touchdown and the 84-yard touchdown, both to Ryan Williams. That explosiveness was fun to see, and also a little expected, just kind of given the competition. Mike, when you think of the offensive performance from Saturday, what was one thing that you liked?
I think the offensive line actually dominating an opponent that they should be, I think, was better than last year. I don't know if they ever really did against Middle Tennessee State. It felt like there was something lacking, if I remember correctly, when they opened the season last year. And I was just looking back at their stats from that game. Like, Jace McClellan had 10 runs for 43 yards. Mm-hmm. Roydell Williams, 7 runs for 36 yards, which is a little bit better. Richard Young, 5 for 19. Jamarian Miller, 4 for 14. Just, they weren't dominating in the running game last year the way they should, even though they had 205 rushing yards because they ran 40 times. But this game, Justice Haynes, 4 for 102. Jam Miller, 5 for 54. You get into Hill and Riley later in the game. You had a second team line in there. And the strange thing to me, too, is Richard Young, for a lot of buzz around that guy in the spring, and he was like pushing your top 2 guys, did not get a ton of run. Only 6 carries, only 8 yards. And it seemed like Daniel Hill was kind of maybe, I don't say above him, but they were playing Daniel Hill a little bit more. That was an interesting situation there for me to watch. And I wouldn't sit here today and say, like, Richard Young impressed me in that, like, he needs to push Haynes or Jam Miller for playing time. I think there's a pretty clear delineation there. But yeah, overall, I think the offensive line, the first team offensive line, should just know that you're going up against guys that you should be ragdolling, and they pretty much did. I mean, some of the blocking on, like, Haynes' touchdown run, the long one, was just, you had all the space in the world, which is what you should be doing against an opponent like that.
No, I agree. They were very aggressive. They were dominant, especially run blocking. They were moving people. I think I cracked the joke a couple of different times in the press box. Like, I could have probably gained 6 yards on some of those runs because those guys were moving dudes out of the way, and Haynes and Miller would get 4, 5, 6 yards downfield before they'd even get touched or before a defender would even be in the vicinity. So I agree. I thought that was nice to see. The big plays were really nice to see. I just loved that, again, Alabama, the bigger, faster, stronger team. Last year, I think against Middle Tennessee, they won purely because they had better athletes. I think this year, the dominance over Western Kentucky, just watching the game, like not only did they have the bigger, faster, stronger athletes, but like those bigger, faster, stronger athletes, for the most part, executed. We can nitpick some of the penalties. We can nitpick a couple of small things here and there. I know Elijah Pritchett maybe struggled a little bit early on in pass protection because he was thrown into the left tackle position literally during warmups. He settled in as the game went on and played a little bit better. But for the most part, like they probably only used 10% of the playbook and they executed. Like hey, we're bigger than you. We're going to move you out of the way so that our star players can do what they need to do. And I thought that was just good to see them execute what they needed and wanted to do. And whatever it is they wanted to practice on Saturday or work out or look at or figure out, they pretty much did. Like, they pretty much just did whatever they wanted, which was really good to see. Circling back on the offense, Alex, I'll throw this back to you. What was one thing that you did not like about the offensive performance on Saturday?
The penalties overall, you just like to see a little bit more clean right out of the gate. Just execution on that side of it. It's first game jitters. Yeah, there's a lot of guys rotating in, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit less of that. And again, the other, it's the explosive plays cutting both ways. I talked about it before. I didn't like that I didn't get to see extended drives. And it's like one of those things, you got to take what you can take, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I would have liked to have seen them get into more different situations in terms of third and shorts and being able to come up with that, getting able to see more receivers get in on the passing game. But that was just the way the game went. There's no real fault with that. I was just hoping to see a little bit more in terms of that.
Mike, you agree, or what was one thing you did not like about the offensive performance?
I mean, the Brailsford snap has to be better. Like, they can't do that in a situation that's meaningful in a game against Georgia. Like, you can't. If they're doing that, like, I don't know what's going on. So you have to clean that up. I think that's number one. And then number two, I agree with Alex. Just not a whole lot of meat to really dig your teeth into in this game in terms of, like, it's kind of like the 8A game. I mean, Milroe, how many passes he threw that day? It was like 8 or 9. Kind of like this game. It's just, and this was a better performance, I think, for Milroe than it was an 8A game. But just there's not a whole lot of meat in terms of, like, it's 3rd and 7. Is he making the right read, throwing over the middle accurately? Because there's a couple plays from Jalen, like missed the throw, the swing route to the running back on the right, he just overthrew. And, there's a few things in there, like you put it in a different situation against a better opponent and the results, potentially damaging. So, again, there's just not a whole lot of data. And then once you get up by 50 points and it's the 3rd or 4th quarter of a game like this, you're just having Dylan Lonergan hand the ball off every play and you're not learning a whole lot. So it's just kind of the lack of stuff to evaluate on our end, and quite honestly, to talk about because it's just, there's not a whole lot there after the first quarter. The game's over.
No, I agree. I think I would have. That's probably the one thing I didn't like. I would have liked to have seen a longer sustained drive with the first team offense. I think the longest scoring drive they had, 10 plays, 79 yards in the 4th quarter. By then the game was over. I believe the first team also in the 3rd quarter had a 9-play, 61-yard touchdown drive. I would have just liked to have seen that a little bit more in the first half, maybe. You look at some of the receiving numbers, and they're good, right? Milroe finished 7 of 9 for 200 yards, 78% completion, quarterback rating of basically 375. But Jeremy Bernard, 1 catch. Emmanuel Henderson, 1 catch. CJ Dupree and Josh Cuevas each had 1 catch. Kendrick Law had 1 catch. It was a touchdown. It was a very nice play. But, Ryan Williams kind of stole the show with a lot of his bigger plays, and that's good. But I would have liked to have seen, like, can they dink and dunk their way down the field? Can they, I know in the running game, it's just, okay, the offensive line is good enough and bigger enough and faster enough and stronger enough to just move guys out of the way. And then the running backs are good enough to take it the distance. But it would have been nice to see a little bit more of a sustained drive. And I don't know exactly how you legislate that into a game plan.
You don't. Yeah, it's 2 short fields to begin with because of the picks, and then you had 4 big plays. The Ryan Williams touchdown, the Justice Haynes run, another Ryan Williams touchdown, and there was another one in there too. The Jam Miller 39 yards, which is right after Jalen Milroe ran for 40 yards. People kind of forget that. That was another big play. So just kind of the way it went. I mean, the 2 drives in the first half, they didn't score touchdowns, were the 3 and out to begin with, and then the fumbled snap. And that's it. They scored touchdowns every other drive. So whether you do it in 10 plays or whatever, and your defense, I think, was at fault too a little bit because you had Western Kentucky get the ball with 12:35 left in the second quarter. They were on the field for like 15 plays, and then you have the 4th down turnover. Alabama did not get the ball back until 3 minutes left in the second quarter. So that was an almost 10-minute drive from Western Kentucky. Just didn't really give you the chance offensively to have the ball.
So would have liked to have seen that. Wanted to see them cut down on some penalties, but in a game like this where maybe there's really not a ton to take away from, kind of have to pick nits a little bit. Defensively, very, very strong performance from the new look Alabama defense, the unveiling, I suppose, of Kane Womack's 4-2-5 swarm defense in crimson. They allowed 145 total yards, which is the fewest. I looked this up. That's the fewest Western Kentucky has ever had since I believe it was their 2009 season opener against Tennessee when they only had 83 yards. Like, this is one of the more prolific offenses in recent seasons in college football. I know that they play lesser competition and, it's more of like an air raidy spread type, throw the ball around the yard, and it's prolific. It's not always very good, but they put up a lot of numbers. Alabama basically held them to nothing. This was the first time Western Kentucky has been shut out since, I believe, 2012 as well, when they also lost to Alabama, a Nick Saban coached Alabama team that was 35-0, if I remember right. Like, this is a team that is not used to not moving the ball, and Alabama quite literally did not let them move the ball. Mike, I'll let you start this one. What was one thing you liked about the defensive performance from Alabama on Saturday?
Was similar to the defensive performance they had under Nick Saban, and he's the greatest defensive coach of all time, right? And similar situations too, like Utah State and Middle Tennessee State are offenses that were up tempo. They like to throw the ball. That was the story last year with Rick Stockstill coming in for Middle Tennessee and Saban giving a scouting report on them, and similar thing. They shut them down. I mean, the last 3 openers they've had, now that they're in this system where they play these non-conference games home and home, not in the opener, they're 174-7 is their point margin. These last 3 openers. And if you go back to the Miami game in 2021, they're 220 or 220-ish in 20. They've outscored opponents by 200 points in the last 4 openers. So it's basically doing what they were doing the last few years under Saban defensively. So that's a good thing. Like, I think you want to see the continuation of what Saban's defense was, and I guess it's different. I don't know if it's like glaringly different watching the game last night that like this is a different scheme. I think there's some times when they were lining up in a very similar alignment to what they did under Saban, especially when they had Campbell and Q Robinson on the edges. There was a couple times there they had that kind of 2 outside linebacker look that Saban would use a lot. So, yeah, well, we'll see. And there was a few times like that sustained drive in the second quarter. Western Kentucky was 2 or 3 on 4th downs. There's a few times when you're like, hey, they're kind of moving the ball a little bit too much than what you'd expect. But then they came up with the play to kind of put an end to it, whether it was the interception or the other interception or whatever it was. So, I think the rotation among the defense, I think we were a little bit surprised to see Zay Mincy in the game pretty early, to see Jalen Bakwe in the game. I think we were surprised not to see Deshaun Jones in the game early. That was interesting because we're all talking about this rotation or competition between him and Xavier Brown, but it was really Mbakwe who was the first corner up off the bench, and then it was Mincy after that. And Deshaun Jones didn't get into the game until later.
I don't know if it was something that came across, but in the TV they said that there was a doubt about whether Deshaun would even play.
Okay.
He's been dealing with a hamstring injury, so
Gotcha.
that might have had something to do with it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That I haven't watched the TV yet, and that wasn't mentioned post game by DeBoer, so that's good to know. It was strange. I think we were all wondering why Mbakwe was in there so early. But they were playing all sorts of guys, along the defensive line, and linebackers are rotating. Justin Jefferson got in there. They moved Campbell to the outside. They had Brayson Hubbard playing a lot in the secondary. Used 3 different Huskies. So just get as many guys experience as you can. It wasn't like Saban where it was like waves of first, second, third team. It was just rotating through guys kind of with the first team, so to speak.
If you were a scholarship defensive player on Alabama's roster, you probably saw playing time at least in the first half, if not sometime midway through the third quarter yesterday. If you were a defensive player at all, scholarship or walk-on, you got on the field at some point yesterday. I think I counted a grand total of 40 total defensive players that got on the field yesterday for Alabama, which is like, one, when you're up 63-0, duh, like that kind of makes sense. But also, like, to your point, Mike, especially early on, they made it a point to play almost everybody within the 2 deep through the first quarter, which was, I think that took a lot of us by surprise. It was also interesting to hear DeBoer talk about it, where like, yeah, that was kind of sort of the plan going in for this particular game against this particular opponent. And then we just kind of saw them continue to do it all the way throughout the game. So even with, guys that might be third, fourth, even fifth string at certain positions. So that was just really interesting to see, and kind of curious to see what Womack has to say about that when we get to talk to him on Monday. Alex, what was one thing you liked about the defensive performance on Saturday?
Well, I got $100 that says when Womack's asked about it, he will say some version of experience is finite. He said that about 50 times since he's gotten here. No knock on Kane, but that's his thing. We're talking about what we liked and what we didn't like on defense. Obviously, I like Keon Sabb getting a couple of interceptions, but what I liked more than that was I think I counted 8 pass breakups. Getting to the football, turning and looking for the football. That has been a thing that hasn't necessarily happened a whole lot under Nick Saban's tenure. That wasn't the way they coached that position, and I understand that's a vast oversimplification of what it was, but being able to get to the ball, knock it down, and not even give the offense an opportunity there, really like that, especially when you're playing a bunch of different guys. What I didn't like was the inability to really get home in terms of pass rush. I think 1 sack, 3 hurries for a team that had to put the ball in the air a lot. And I know you can pressure the quarterback and it doesn't always show up, but you got to get home a little bit more, and not really seeing those guys like we expected really stand out. LT Overton didn't really bubble up too much for me. Those names you were looking for, it doesn't mean they're not going to in the coming weeks, but I wanted to see a little bit more in that respect.
Yeah, you had that one Q Robinson play where he subbed in and immediately was on top of TJ Finley. But yeah, after that, it wasn't a ton. I know DeBoer talked about his pregame, like Western Kentucky wanted to get rid of the ball quickly. But even then, like, you should be overwhelming that defensive line. It was surprising to see Quay Rusa in there to start based on everything we've seen. That was interesting, but he probably, of those 3 guys, I think it's safe to say he has the highest upside. So, it's a little bit of a, let's get him some snaps and see if we can really get him along, I think is probably the philosophy there, because we know what we have in Q Robinson and Keanu Codd, who really just didn't show up to me. Of those 3 guys, I think he was the least noticeable on the field, which, it's his 4th year now. I think at some point, if he's not showing up, you got to go to Rusa more, which they already are, I guess, or maybe Yanze Pierre, or kind of see what you got. But yeah, there needs to be that guy when, let's say you're losing to Georgia in the second half, you need to get Carson back on the ground somehow. Like, you need that guy to go and get him, and still up in the air on whether they have that.
Well, speaking of Rusa and guys who played earlier than not, did we have any kind of surprise from the quote unquote official depth chart besides only having 1 cornerback technically listed?
I don't know that there were too many surprises when I was looking at it. I think
surprises to us, but surprises to fans who responded to my tweet. And I think the biggest name people were asking about was Keon Keeley, which look, we've been telling people, don't, even if you've been playing the video game and he's out there every play, like, that doesn't mean it's reality, because it's not what fall camp has looked like. And he's 4th at that position. I think that's safe to say, given we know Latham and Overton are 1 and 2, and then Jordan Renaud was the third guy on the field, and I think they like him and what he's been in that position a little bit longer. He was there last year, playing defensive line, and Keeley's new to the defensive line, but just how quickly is he picking it up is the question. And you don't want to give up on a guy, but it is year 2, I think, for a 5-star kid. Like, you just want to probably see more than what we've seen so far, and I'm sure they'll continue to work with him, and we'll just have to see where the chips lie at the end of the year.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It was the Husky position was listed as or, right? With Red Morgan and
Yep, I think so.
That was the one that I was a little surprised to see formalized, just because it's been most of the conversation has surrounded Devontae. To see them sort of give a nod to Red that you're in a position that can push him at some point in the season.
And you had King Mack, who seemed to come on later in camp, and he was on the field too. They got him on there a decent amount. So you have 3 guys. Just again, you have that one guy that you need that pass breakup against Georgia in the second half to kind of pound home that point. Like, who's that one guy who's going to make that play?
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to see who it was. Red Morgan had that DPI that was fairly obvious. It's just a question, I guess, whether it's catchable, but I think it was close enough where you have to let it go.
And he had another one that probably could have been called pass interference, but I guess between when he arrived and when the ball arrived, the ref thought different of it, so he didn't ultimately get that call. I think it went down actually the pass breakup for Red Morgan, so kudos to him for that. The interesting part, Alex, you brought up the 8 different pass breakups in the box score. 5 of them were by guys who are normally lined up in the front 7. So, because you had like James Smith had 2, Otis had 1, Deontay Lawson had 1, I think Yonze Pierre had 1. Like, they were batting balls down at the line of scrimmage, and that was one, I think, impressive just by the front 7. Like this, we talked about the rotation on the defense, and a lot of guys in the front 7 got to play. That was one of the things I liked was just kind of the mixing and matching, and Kane was experimenting a little bit. Like, obviously we saw Rusaw a lot at Wolf. They also had, I think you brought this up too, Mike, they had a formation on defense where it was either Rusaw or Q Robinson and Jihad Campbell, kind of as those outside linebackers, that they were either, kind of clean rushers or just edge setters. And then in the middle, that was, how do you get all 3 middle linebackers on the field? That's how you did it, right? Because then Justin Jefferson and Deontay Lawson were sitting in the middle, and that was a fairly effective defensive alignment that they had there. And I thought that was kind of cool just to see them mix and match a couple of small things here and there. I thought Rusaw played really, really well. I know box score wise, he probably didn't pop, but what it was at Western Kentucky's first drive, he set a really mean edge on a 2nd down run play that was a 2-yard loss. And then the very next play, Q came in and got the sack. Rusaw was just kind of doing shit. Like, he was just like, they kind of like, oh, this dude's an athlete. He can, kind of lower his head or lower his shoulder and just blow things up and get Finley off his platform. And, I think it was Keon Sabb's 2nd interception. Rusaw kind of blew through the pocket, and Finley is athletic enough to escape, but he had to, he got off his platform, had to reset. And by the time he cocked back and threw the ball down the field, Sabb had read him entirely and was just like, yep, I'm going to step in front of the tight end and take this 64 yards the other way. So I don't know. I was encouraged by what I saw from Rusaw. I was really encouraged by what I saw from Jihad Campbell. It sounds like they're going to use him in a lot of different ways this season, whether as a pass rusher, whether as a middle linebacker, whether as a guy who can set the edge, whether he's a guy who can, I think what he was in on the first 3 plays of the game. And one of them, like, he was kind of in shallow coverage when Zabian Brown was having to cover the tight end. Jihad Campbell was sitting right there. So there was a lot that I liked. Again, can this translate to games against a Georgia, a Tennessee, an Oklahoma, teams of that nature? That's what I'll be kind of curious to see. But it was kind of fun to see them mix and match and just do a bunch of different stuff just to kind of see what was working. How do the guys feel? Are they comfortable with it? I don't know. Like, it'll be kind of interesting to see, what more do they experiment with moving forward, and what do they kind of hone in on as strengths of the defense, I suppose, moving forward. I don't know. That's one thing that I thought was kind of interesting, and one thing I like to see.
Yeah, I think we're going to look back and we're going to say that Jihad is the most versatile player on this defense, and is really the chess piece that Kane gets to move around, because he just has that positional versatility that I think when you don't have a bunch of standout pass rushers, can slide him over and really he can be effective. So interesting. I didn't know if we'd get that look week 1. I wonder if they'd kind of hold that back, but I think it's a preview of what's to come.
Mike, is there one thing about the defense that you did not like?
I mean, some of those sustained drives early, Western first quarter they had a let me pull up the drive chart here. 8-play, 53-yard drive in the first quarter ended in a pick. And then it was a 21 play. I said 15 early. 21 play, 71-yard drive for 9 minutes in the second quarter. That just you don't love to see against a team that you should be getting off the field pretty quickly. But I mean, it was a shutout, so not a whole lot from the defense. But I think it would be big for them if the two Carver Montgomery kids, James Smith and Quay Rusaw, really emerged this year, which they did. James Smith did last year to some extent. It's not like these guys are coming out of nowhere, but Rusaw, I think, has really pulled ahead in terms of him and Yanze Pierre, the two guys last year, and obviously getting on the field now. So I think those two guys could be, and they're both pretty highly rated kids. I think there's a lot of talent there, pretty disruptive players for them if they really keep on coming. But personally, Alex, I know you said you were surprised that they would show the Justin Jefferson look. I was surprised that they would show the Cole Adams, Ryan Williams, and Jeremy Bernard look. I just think that's probably shown a little bit too much.
We're going to get away from Cole.
I just wanted to state for the record that those three guys are out there at one point in the first quarter.
Zero catches.
They didn't start.
I had to check, but 0 catches for Cole.
Now, hang on. To Mike's credit, there was a play where Milroe was like scrambling, and I'm watching a million different things on the field at one time, but I saw it like as Milroe kind of works his way out of the danger. I'm sitting there tapping Mike's shoulder because Cole Adams clearly knows the scramble drill rules, and he's running down the field, and I'm just like, Mike, Cole's about to be wide open, and then Milroe did something else with it. But I was just like, I see it. I understand. There's Mr. Reliable running down the field. He would have been wide open.
I mean, the reason why Cole didn't have any catches is because you're not disrespecting Cole Adams by playing him in the second half in a blowout. Like, you put the younger, less effective players in there later in the game, and you let Cole Adams sit on the bench and get ready for the next game. Like, clearly,
there's some truth
to that because he didn't play this. He wasn't one of those guys you're just throwing out there in the second half. Like, he was one of those top 4 or 5 receivers that were out there with the initial rotation. The first look I think was actually different than what anybody was expecting because Kendrick Law was in the slot with Ryan Williams and Bernard. I think we were expecting Law to be more of an outside guy and then Prentice or Adams be the slot, but those are probably your 3 best receivers. So that made sense to have those guys out there. But then, there was some plays where Cole was in the slot with Bernard and Williams, and Prentice got in there a few times. Emmanuel Henderson had a few snaps, and clearly those are your top 6 guys. And, it's debatable who number 7 is. I think Caleb Odom's probably in the pole position for 7th receiver, if that makes any sense. But
I don't think we're going to see a ton of Caleb this year.
Right. I agree.
He surges in practice. And that was sort of the thing that was emerging during camp was like, let's pump our brakes a little bit. He might be 6'5", but he's still a guy who's shifting outside to play receiver. There's all these other guys ahead of him. It's just, this year is probably not the year for the Caleb Odom experience.
That was another guy that when I tweeted the depth chart and he wasn't on there, people were responding saying, "Where's Caleb Odom? Like, haven't you paid attention all fall camp? Like, it's not one of the top 6. So he's not on the 2 deep when you have 3 receivers listed."
What do we think was the play of the game? Alex, I'll throw it back to you first.
Oh, Ryan Williams. Ryan Williams' first touchdown. Just like get it over with. Let the hype machine roll. I mean, this kid he's got the chance to be a star, right? I mean, when you can run like that and you're that athletic and you got a quarterback who can get you the football, to me, that's the play of the game because it's what we've talked about for, I would say 4 weeks, but really it's been more like 6 months just waiting for him to get to campus. But seeing that promise fulfilled, he will go up against much more difficult situations. I understand that. But to make that statement that I'm here, I'm ready to go, I think that was the big take. Honestly, it's a big takeaway from the whole game is that the Ryan Williams hype might be totally real.
Yeah, I think, when he plays better defenses, there will be defensive backs who see him run down the field and will probably follow him. So can he continue to produce those explosive plays when the DBs are better? That's what I want to see. I do. I agree. Just the idea that Alabama's bigger, faster, stronger, and they took care of business. Part of that is seeing, okay, like if you don't put a dude on this guy, Ryan Williams will make you pay. That in itself, I thought was the really good part about seeing what he did this weekend.
Because it opens things up for Jeremy Bernard, for Kendrick Law, for Kobe Prentice, that they're not just going to write off the freshman receiver.
Mike, do you agree, or what did you think was the play of the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the most obvious one. I think the opening kickoff is also a candidate because the game was over after that. It seemed like I don't know, like there's a lot of candidates. There wasn't one that really stood out, and not to discount the Ryan Williams play, but again, he was wide open. The corner just gave up on that route that he ran. So, play of the game in terms of it wasn't even the longest touchdown. Haynes' touchdown was actually a play longer, so maybe that's the correct play. The 85-yard touchdown run instead of the 84-yard touchdown. But I don't know. It's like picking your favorite chocolate out of the box on Valentine's Day. Like, they're all good to me. So
no, hold on. They're not all.
I like chocolate.
70% of that heart-shaped box is garbage that you can throw away.
Food takes. Here we go.
Milk chocolate, gone. Anything with fruit in it, gone. Coconut, gone.
Well, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. This podcast has gone off the rails because we're talking about Valentine's Day candy.
And you're quoting Forrest Gump, although that seems very oddly on.
Actually, it is appropriate. So we've reached the end.
Almost.
About a 63-0 game.
Got a couple more questions for you guys. I think the play of the game for me, and I don't know if this is it's obviously not the biggest deal in the world, but one thing that I saw interesting, it was actually a 2-play sequence. It was the 2 plays that led into Milroe hitting Kendrick Law for the 22-yard touchdown. I believe it was 2nd and 8. Western Kentucky blitzed their corner off the edge, and he was a free rusher. I liked that Milroe recognized that immediately, tucked the ball, and ran the other direction. It was only a 2-yard gain, but I just love that there was a free rusher coming in. He sensed it and was just like, all right, I got to make a decision because I can't do anything dumb to set us back or keep us behind the chains. So it was, again, only a 2-yard gain, but I just like that he instantly kind of recognized that something is coming. I need to tuck the ball, protect the ball, move forward, and just get what I can. Then that led to, obviously, the touchdown throw to Kendrick Law, where right off the snap, again, pressure coming at him, this time from the left side, because Pritchett, I believe, lost his one-on-one fairly quickly. Milroe stepped up in the pocket, and instead of just deciding to tuck and run, he did that thing that we saw in the LSU game last year where he manipulated the defense a little bit. As soon as he stepped up, a couple of Western Kentucky DBs, I think, or maybe one DB, one linebacker, a couple of defenders took an immediate step toward him. And that opened up all that space for Kendrick Law. Milroe recognized everything, saw the defender step up, immediately hit a nice throw. Law was able to take it, made a play, because I think he made a couple guys miss on his way to the end zone. Those 2 plays, probably not the play of the game, probably ultimately going to be forgettable by most people, but I watched it live. I saw it again when I watched the replay. I just thought that those were 2 smart, good plays by Jalen Milroe, and he doesn't make those plays in week 1 last year, but he's making those plays in week 1 this year. I think that's a sign of growth. I was encouraged to see that immediately right out of the gate, and it makes me very excited to see where he could be 3, 4, 5 weeks down the road.
Along those same lines, Ty Simpson looked pretty good, escaping the pocket and rushing for that touchdown. A couple nice passes to Caleb Odom. You like to see the development there. Obviously, that is not even A through Z and the most important things to happen for this season. Maybe it will be if he ends up playing, but good to see him get some snaps and look really good doing it, not just handing the ball off and walking to the sideline.
Normally, this is where we would ask if, who do we think the game MVP was? But at 63-0, I'm not sure that there's actually a most valuable player that comes out of a game like this. So I'll immediately skip to the last part of what we'll include on every single post-game podcast. One question that we have about Alabama moving forward. Mike, I'll start with you. What's one thing you're still curious about as Alabama moves into week 2?
A lot. I think it's, can't overreact after 1 week. Both directions for any team. So there's a lot of blowouts. I mean, Ole Miss won 76-0. Oklahoma beat up on whoever they played.
Temple.
Arkansas beat up on whoever they played. Georgia beat up on Clemson. Take something away from that. But,
Georgia beat up on their cupcake.
Right. Yeah.
Little old Clemson. They're looking more and more.
But look, especially now with the format, 12-team playoff, 5 months away from a national championship game, it's something. Now we have something to look at, but let's not blow anything out of proportion. Again, both directions for any team, and because there's a whole new set of games coming next week, and a lot could be different for a lot of teams. So, again, what I'm looking for is still everything. Like there's still, as Kalen Bohr said, none of the points you scored this week carry over to next week, and now there's film on Alabama that people can start looking at. So, what I'm looking for is the same that what I was looking for last week, to be honest, like a lot on both sides of the ball. Just got to keep watching and see what happens.
Alex, what's one question you have about Alabama moving forward?
What does the offensive line look like next week? Specifically, let's not have any issues snapping the ball. Again, some of that can be written off as just miscommunication, first game jitters. I don't know why you're having those with a freshman All-American and an All-SEC guy who
in his fourth year.
Yeah, I don't know why that's necessarily happening, but, it's good to be excited. And then, of course, Caden Proctor's status and what that means moving forward. How serious that is. Is he going to be able to play next week? Are they going to give him the week off, thinking that that's a game that they can sort of handle without him? Very curious to see what that looks like moving forward.
I think my one question is for the defense, specifically the secondary. This was not the stress test that we thought it was going to be, but we kind of thought that the tests get a little harder through the first few weeks of the season. And next week, it's going to be Byron Brown in South Florida with a really good play caller and Alex Golish. They're coming to town. They probably feel pretty confident after the way the game went last year in that rainy, miserable day in Tampa. Can the defense do it again? Specifically, can the secondary hold up as well as they did on Saturday against another talented quarterback who's going to be a lot more mobile, who's going to, no offense to the Heltons in Western Kentucky, probably going to have a better play caller on his side as well. They're also going to have a game under their belt. So they're going to know a little bit more about themselves coming into this game. And also, like we've mentioned, there's film on Alabama now. So what are they going to try to attack? Can Alabama adjust, or can they just shut it down like they did this Saturday? Just very curious to see the second stress test and to see if there's actually going to be stress involved in this test. I'd like to see them come out and play with the same level of energy. I'd like to see them come out and execute again, but we'll see. It's going to be a different type of matchup. And I think it's also going to be just very, very interesting to see. Let's apply some pressure on these guys and see what they can do. 63-0 doesn't really tell me a whole lot. What can Byron Brown in South Florida do? Just very curious to see how that works.
Yeah, I think Byron Brown, that matchup, especially setting the edge, containing a guy like that, it's going to be really important. Not just this game, but also moving forward. You think about playing against Nico and some other quarterbacks left on the schedule, you're going to need to be able to do that.
I know that I think I've written this before, but Byron Brown, one of two players to throw for 3,000 and rush for 800 yards last season. The other guy that did it was Jaden Daniels, and he was pretty good. So we'll see what Alabama's defense can do. I think that's going to be a really intriguing matchup. We'll obviously have plenty of stories and a couple more pods to get you guys ready for that matchup. That's next Saturday, 6 p.m. again, kickoff at Bryant-Denny Stadium. I believe that game is also on ESPN, so stay tapped into that. But that's all we've got for today's show, recapping Alabama's 63-0 win over Western Kentucky. They're now 1-0 on the 2024 season. We'll be back sometime, probably Tuesday-ish, to kind of recap some of the early press availabilities, discuss a few more things from maybe this game, and start really looking ahead to Saturday's game against South Florida, the Week 2 matchup. In the meantime, though, be sure to rate and review this show wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, even our Bama 24/7 YouTube page. Subscribe to Bama 24/7 and 24/7 Sports. Believe we are still running our Labor Day special, our Week 1 special, whatever you want to call it, special. 75% off an annual VIP membership, a year's worth of Bama 24/7 and 24/7 Sports, less than $3. Take advantage of that. It's going to be a really fun season if Saturday is any indication. As always, we appreciate you guys for listening. We'll talk to you all again soon.